Hi, welcome everybody. I hope everybody's having a great time so far. Thank you for joining us. And welcome to WordPress Accessibility Day. My name is Abbas Jaffrey, and I'm a mathematics teacher and tutor focused on making mathematics more accessible on the web and beyond. I want to thank everybody for joining us for Form Accessibility and Beyond. And with our speakers today, we have Rian Rietveld. She is a web accessibility specialist at Level Level in the Netherlands. She works in Rotterdam for the digital agency Level Level as an accessibility consultant and is a trainer for the online learning platform, the Ally Collective. She is part of web projects from start to finish, training both the Level Level team and their clients in web accessibility. Besides that, she does accessibility consultancy and training for major web agencies and companies. She loves to share her knowledge at WordCamps and accessibility conferences worldwide. When not coding, reviewing, or teaching, you can find Rian working in her garden. And we welcome Rian, pardon me. And we also have Morgan Kay, a software engineer at Rocket Genius, where she works on a product team to build Gravity forms. She has over 15 years experience with WordPress, both as a developer and community organizer. She has organized WordCamps and WordPress meetups and facilitated trainings and safe spaces for women and underrepresented groups in technology. When she's not working at her computer, Morgan is usually out hiking in the beautiful Pacific Northwest or reading. So welcome both of you. Thank you. So everybody, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A tab in Slido, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. And please use the ideas section, to chat with other attendees. And so now I'll turn it over to Rian.
Hi. Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Morgan.
Yeah. I'm Morgan, and today we are going to talk about forms and accessibility. Forms are the most common interactive elements on websites and the most basic way for users to share information with you. So form accessibility and usability are absolutely vital. If users can't fill out your form, they can't interact with you, they can't place orders, they can't contact you.
Yeah, we are not going to talk only about code, but also about form design and how to think about forms from the viewpoint of your users. There's so much to tell, and we have only 40 minutes, so we only address the most important takeaways. We have demo code and all the resources online on the GitHub page for you. The shortcode for that page is gravity4.ms/3 capital U 9 capital S Y 4 capital T. So, Morgan.
Yeah. So when you put a form on your website, the very first thing you need to do is to ask yourself, why are you building a form? And how can you build the form to meet not only your needs, but also your users' needs? So often accessibility is an afterthought. We build a website and then we test it with keyboard navigation and a screen reader and we fix the problems we have and we call it a day. But you should really start thinking about accessibility before you even create a form, because they're so important. So you want to build the form, not just the code, but also the form questions and the form visual design with your users' needs in mind from the very beginning. In addition to accessibility, you also want to think about usability, and not just for users with disabilities, but for all of your users. Accessibility and usability are very closely linked together, and it's not just about assistive tools like keyboard navigation and screen readers. You want all of your users to easily understand and fill out your forms. So if you ask yourself from the beginning why you're building a form, this is going to impact how you build the form. For example, you're going to want to build an e-commerce form differently from a job application. On an e-commerce form, you want it to be as short and as easy as possible. You don't want users to have time to second guess their purchases. You want them to give them give you your money and submit the form. But if your form is a job application, users are willing to put some more work into a job application. So it can be a more complex form, but you still don't want to make it too difficult for them. So different forms have different usability requirements, and you want to think about that from the beginning. You need to think about what information you actually need from your users. Do you really need all of those form fields? Once you start asking questions, it's really tempting to keep asking more, but you want to make sure that you're really only asking for users for the information you actually need. For instance, on contact forms often have phone numbers, and do you really need that phone number on the contact form? Or demographic information. We often want to know as much as we can about our users, age, experience level, how they found us. But a lot of that information isn't strictly necessary, and it just makes the form longer for the user. On the other hand, maybe you do need that information, and that's fine. Ask for it if you need it. But just be aware that users might be hesitant to share even personal information like gender or marital status or race. Only ask for that information if you need it. And if you do need that kind of information, make it clear to your users why you are requesting the information and how you're going to use it. So for example, if you are asking for demographic information such as race or gender, make it clear why you need that information and how you're going to use it. Or another example is a phone number field. If you are asking for a phone number, you should probably clarify whether you plan to use that number for phone calls or for text, because some users might actually give you a different phone number depending on how you're going to use it. So the more information you give your users about why you're asking these questions, the more likely they are to be willing to answer those questions. You also want to think about the easiest way for users to give you the information you need and what kind of form inputs are easiest for them to use. For instance, if you are asking for categories, you might have a list of 100 categories, and you should think about, is it easier for your users to read through that big long list and pick out the correct ones? Or would it be easier for them to just type in their own categories? If they're typing in their own categories, the data you get might not be as clean, but you'll actually get better data because your users, it's going to be easier for your users to fill out the correct information. On the other hand, if it is really important that users give exactly the categories that you have in mind, then a dropdown probably is the better choice. But you just need to think through, is it easier for your users to read through a long list or to type in their own answer? So once you've thought about these questions, what information do you need from your users and what's the easiest way for them to give you that information? Now you're ready to start building your form. And I'll turn it over to Rian to talk some more about usability.
Yeah. Form usability or user experience. How to help your user fill out the form as easy as possible. The last thing you want that users leave because a form is too complicated or not trustworthy. Very important is to be predictable. For example, make sure the user has everything they need at hand before they start filling out the form. For example, a credit card number, passport, an order number, or other documents or information they might need. Do you have a timer on your form? For example, for security reasons. Don't cause a panic. Oh my, I don't have that time. I cannot do this. Tick tock, the user panics. So, inform them in advance. There will be a timer and tell them why there is a timer. Inform them about the time they have and give them a way to extend that time. Not everybody is that quick. As Morgan already told, only ask what you really need to know. But even then, that can be quite a lot. So do you have a long form? Break it up in steps. Each step a topic. Tell how many steps there are. Each step Name each step and tell what will happen next. Let users know how much they still need to fill out. For everybody, especially people with anxiety, this is helpful and reassuring. And at the bottom of each step, provide clear navigation. Not just a back and next, but back to step 2. And the next step, step 4, is student information, for example. Then people are reassured they are doing the right thing, and they also can go back and check what has been filled out. So be predictable. Don't put the burden of your problem on the user. And that's what happens a lot. We all hate spam in forms, don't you? Maybe except the people who send you spam. So what do? You put the burden of preventing spam on your user. Hey, you, prove you are human with good intentions. For example, you add a CAPTCHA. This is an example I saw in the wild. This is actually a CAPTCHA from Google version 2. Please click each image containing a smiling dog. Really. I'm a cat person. Smiling dogs is really a problem for me. And what about people with autism who have difficulties reading emotion from a face? I also must be able to recognize US school buses. Really, I'm from Europe. What do I know about US school buses? Google CAPTCHA version 3 is user-friendly, but maybe has some privacy issues. A rising star is Turnstile, who claims to be user-friendly, privacy-preserving alternative to CAPTCHA. I haven't researched it, but which option you choose, do your research and take accessibility, GDPR, and usability into account. And then the heated debate about should I use a multi-select versus a checkbox or an autocomplete? What is better, a multi-select or checkboxes? And what about a searchable autocomplete if you want to select something? Think from your user's point of view. When you want your user, your visitor, to select options, make life easy for them. Multi-select interface is hard. Checkboxes are super easy. And if you have many options, a searchable, accessible select is useful. Let me show you. This is part of the GitHub pages we created for you with all the demo code and also an example of a multi-select checkboxes, a select with many options. And I want to show you an accessible alternative for a select with a search. So an auto select, if you have a multi-select, if you use a mouse, you can select an option. And if you want to select the bird, you have to select comment. But if you want to remove it, if I click it, it's gone again. So if I do shift, I select everything, and then with command, this is really a very difficult interface with a mouse, let alone with a keyboard or a screen reader. This is the same with checkboxes. Click, click, ready. And it stays there. It's really, really easy and people get that. So don't use multi-select because it's a very difficult interface.
Hey, Rion.
If you have country,
Rion,
yeah.
is it possible for you to zoom in so that we can see the forms a bit better?
Is it better?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. If you have a country and we want to select with more than 200 options, Morgan already said, yeah, is it the best way? There, you can use a searchable auto-select, but most of them are inaccessible. If you select two or chosen, the screen reader feedback is non-existent. Sometimes with some patterns, the keyboard doesn't work. The US government published on Alpha gov.github.io accessible components, and these are accessible. If you want to search for the Netherlands, it gives you 2 results, and with the screen reader it announces 2 results, and with the arrow down you can actually select one with enter. So this is an accessible alternative for auto-select, for example, for the components that are not accessible. So think about this. Think from the user, what's the best option? Right. Oh, this is the demo. Okay. And then we're going to form design with Morgan.
Yeah. So you want your form to be usable, but you also want it to look nice. Browsers all render form elements a little bit differently, and honestly, out of the box, a lot of them are kind of ugly. So it's natural to want to change the appearance of your forms to make them more consistent across browsers, to make them more pleasing to the eye, and to make them look better with the rest of your website. But you need to be careful when you restyle form elements, and make sure you don't change the design so much that users can't recognize them. So you want to make sure that your designed form inputs still feel familiar and intuitive so users know how to interact with them. For example, this is a demo I found on CodePen that shows how to style radio buttons and checkboxes. And you can see that for both radio buttons and checkboxes, they're using both squares and circles. And then they have these other shapes like this rounded square and this diamond. And it's not obvious from looking at these whether you are allowed to select one or many. Users are used to knowing that when there's a circle, you can select one, and when there's a square, you can select many. So if you use other shapes, it can get really confusing, or if you reverse the functionality, that is also confusing. So make sure that the form inputs are still intuitive and behave in a recognizable way. You also want to make sure that changing the style doesn't change the behavior of the form element or break the functionality. So your styled form elements should work the same way as unstyled form elements, so that users who can't see, who don't know that this looks different, can still interact with the form. So for example, focus states. It's really easy to forget about focus states. Designers often think they're ugly. Developers just kind of forget that it's something we need to deal with. So always test with a keyboard and make sure that you have focus and active states. Here's an example of some code that I found on w3schools.com, which is kind of notorious for having a lot of really bad code examples. We have, if you're looking for code examples, look at our resources because we've given you some good functional examples. But in this particular example, they have restyled the checkbox, and the way they've done it, they're basically hiding the existing checkbox and replacing it with another one, and there's no focus state. You can't tell in this little video, but I am using a keyboard to interact with this form, and there's no indication of which checkbox is active at the moment. And I messed with the code on this to try to add a focus state to it, and the way they've written that code, it is impossible to add a focus state. So just be careful not to break the functionality when you add styles. You also want to be careful with drop-downs. It's really easy to style the input, that initial box at the top of this demo, but styling the drop-down menu that shows up when you click on it is very difficult. It usually requires JavaScript, and it is usually not keyboard navigable. So that drop-down might be really ugly, but you're really better off leaving it alone and leaving it ugly so that users can still interact with it. There is some browser default behavior that you can change without hurting accessibility. For example, field sets. Field sets look really ugly in the browser, but Rian will explain in a few minutes why they're really important. So this is what a form looks like with field sets. With some pretty minimal CSS, you can make field sets look like other inputs. It doesn't take much to remove that border and kind of scoot the legend around a little bit. If you have a form that has a mix of field sets and regular fields, those field sets look extra weird. So you can adjust the behavior of field sets to make them look more like the rest of the form. You should also make sure you put the submit button at the end of the form. And I know that sounds obvious, but this has become very common lately, especially with like terms and conditions or SMS consent. Users, and especially blind users, will not see or read anything that happens below the submit button because they think the submit button is the end of the form. So don't put other information under the button. This is a screenshot from Etsy. They've got that register button, and then underneath it, they have other options for other ways you can sign in. And then below that, they have some legalese saying that by registering, you are agreeing to their terms and conditions. A lot of users are never going to see that. So make sure the submit button is always the very last thing in the form. Don't hide labels. Labels need to always be visible, and placeholders do not replace labels. The placeholder goes away as soon as you start typing. So now you don't know what you're doing. So make sure that the label is always visible. Error messages are also very important. It's easy to forget that you need to design error messages. But you want to create some space at the top of your form so that you can display all of the error messages in one place. You can use color to show that there is an error. So for instance, in this screenshot, the error message is in red, but also use an icon or some other indicator that doesn't rely on color so that people who can't see color will still be able to tell that there's something wrong. You want to make sure that the text of the error message is clear and tells the users what they need to do. And Rian is going to talk some more about error message along with some other standards.
Okay. Next topic is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, on forms. There are quite a few guidelines or success criteria about forms. I want to address the most important ones. For accessibility, we want to comply to WCAG version 2.1. That's at the moment the latest version. And we globally stick to the level AA, so WCAG 2.1 AA. That's what we're going to address. And we give you the most important topics. First, color contrast. Color contrast in forms. Well, you can easily calculate color contrast. If you Google color contrast analyzer, you get like a zillion results. So pick the one you really prefer. For text, like labels, the color contrast must be 4.5 to 1 against the background. But that also counts for the placeholder. Pro tip: add to the placeholder CSS an opacity of 1, because some browsers add by default an opacity to the placeholder. So it is lighter than you defined in the CSS, so add an opacity of 1. There's also a color contrast rule for borders and icons. If you have a form control and you have a border, the color contrast must be 3 to 1. And it also counts for icons that have meaning. That is that people don't need to guess, like, where do I put the mouse to actually click on an input field. Clear borders define that. And then connect the label to an input. Maybe you say, oh, I know that, but I can name you like a zillion developers that hear this for the first time. If you have a label and an input, you have to connect them together. So the input, you give an ID, and the label you give an attribute for referring to that ID. I will run a demo in VoiceOver, and then you hear first no label attached, and then a label attached, and then a label with a placeholder. Let's see if that works.
Heading level 1, connect a label to a form control. Edit text, blank, main. What's your favorite color? Edit text. What's your favorite color? Type the color. Edit text.
So first is there no label attached. The screen reader says just edit text blank. So I have no idea what the label is. If there's a proper label input relation, then it says, what's your favorite color? Edit text. And if there is a placeholder, it first announces the label and then the placeholder. So always connect a label to an input field. And then group elements that belong together in a field set. For example, this is a code example. How many cookies? And there is an option, a select with an option, and you can select a number. If you have a field set, how many cookies is announced with each selection. So they have like a connection with each other. I will show you a screen reader demo on how that works. First with a select, then with radios, buttons, then with checkboxes, and the last one with the shipping address. All these elements belong together in a field set. So these are 4 different field sets.
Heading level 1, field sets. 1. Amount, pop-up button, how many cookies? How menu, 3 items. Tick, 1. 2. Closing menu. 2. Amount, pop-up button. Small, radio button, 1 of 3, select a t-shirt size, group. Medium, selected, radio button, 2 of 3, select a t-shirt size. Large, selected, radio button, 3 of 3, select a t-shirt size. Medium, selected, radio button, 2 of 3, select a t-shirt size. Dog unticked, tick box, which pets do you have, group. Cat unticked, tick box, which pets do you have? Ticked cat, tick box. Bird unticked, tick box, which pets do you have? Mouse unticked, tick box, which pets do you have? Street, edit text, shipping address, group. Postal code, edit text, shipping address. City, edit text, shipping address.
So the relation of the legend is announced with each field. So when you can see clearly, okay, how many cookies this all belongs together, or a shipping address. But if you're blind, you can get it announced with each field to make sure you fill out the fields right. Right, next one. And then use either describe by to connect more information to the input field. So we have a label connected to an input field, but also extra information connected to the input field, and they are announced all together. The label is referring to the ID of the input field. Either describe by is different, that has an ID of its own. The paragraph you want to describe has an ID, and with the input, you say either describe by referring to that ID. This is all in the example code, so you can look it up later. I will show you how this works. It's a short demo.
Heading level 1, ARIA describe B. Your new password, secure edit text, main. Please use a password of minimal 8 characters. I agree with the terms and conditions, unticked, tick box, consent, group. Ticked, I agree with the terms and conditions, tick box. Please read our terms and conditions.
So everything is read out if the input field or the form control gets focus. And then the last topic, form validation. And that's super important because if people cannot fill out your form right or don't understand what goes wrong, they will leave. First, tell the rules in advance. How many times did you scream at the screen? Tell me the rules of the password beforehand. That's so super annoying. You come up with a super password and you press enter or submit, and then, oh no, but it has to be like, well, tell the people in advance what the rules of the password is. And as Morgan already told, not by color alone. Don't put only a red border around the required field that isn't filled out. But what should you do? Well, the default HTML5 warnings are not enough. If you add an attribute required to a form element, some browsers automatically add a form validation to the input and prevent you from submitting the form. If you don't want that, you have to add no validate as attribute to the form element so that validation doesn't pop up. There are 3 items you need to keep in mind, and I'll address them first, and then I do a quick demo with Gravity Forms. First, write clear custom error messages. This field is required is not enough. Provide a valid email address. Please fill out your name. This field is just too generic. In case of more than 2 entries, add a summary of errors above the form. That's super useful, also for people who are blind or people who use a keyboard. And then, for the validation messages with the input field, use array described by to connect the error to the input. On the Gravity Forms website, there is extended documentation on how to make forms accessible. There is information for content providers, for developers. There's information about the warnings on the fields in the admin, for designers, and there's also an accessibility checklist. And it takes you step by step through the settings, how to compose a form with accessibility in mind. So this is a super useful page if you create a form with Gravity Form. So how does form validation work in Gravity Forms? This is an accessible form with a name that's required and an email address that's required. There's an area described by message. We will use your email address only to send you the newsletter and the subscribe button. And I will read it with VoiceOver in Safari.
Level 2, accessible form. Your name, required, edit text. Your email address, required, edit text email field. Subscribe button. Main. There was a problem with your submission. Please review the fields below. Visited link. Your name, please enter your name. List 2 items. Link. Your email address, please enter a valid email address. Your name, required, invalid data, edit text, main. Please enter your name. Your email address, required, invalid data, edit text email field. Please enter a valid email address. We will use your email address only to send you the newsletter. Subscribe button.
So also the screen reader will announce that there are problems with your submission. So if you're blind, you also get the notification that, okay, I didn't fill it out right, or I need some extra information to fill out. So, and all the information is given by a screen reader, and it's easy accessible with a keyboard. If you want to know more about how to create accessible forms or accessibility, on the ALLY Collective, this is a11y-collective.com, we have a course about accessible code with a large chapter about forms. So, conclusion.
The main takeaway here is have empathy for your users, and that means all of your users, those who need assistive technology and those who don't. Think about absolutely everybody who is going to be filling out your form.
Okay, don't create anxiety by not being predictable, by giving people too short time or doing unexpected things. Be trustworthy.
Be predictable. Make sure you explain what will happen next, either when a user clicks a button to go to a next page or when they submit the form.
Form validation is super important. Write good confirmation and error messages.
Keep it simple. Avoid overcomplicating your forms and don't make users have to think or second guess or, cause stress as they fill out the form.
So help all users to fill out your form and make a form as easy to fill out for everyone. Thank you. That was the presentation. We take questions if you want.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rian and Morgan. Okay, we have a number of questions that came in here. So the first one is, what considerations do you need to think about when a user misses a required field? And how will the reader react to the situation? Is there a needed code to comply?
I think we covered that pretty thoroughly in the voiceover demonstration of what happens when there are required fields in a form. Mostly that ARIA described by is the really important thing to make sure that the error message is connected to the field.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any thoughts about empty choices in dropdowns? This person usually adds an empty choice at the top of the required dropdown, so the first choice won't be selected by default.
I think if you make it clear that's an empty choice, that's okay. It happens a lot, so I think it's not unexpected behavior.
Actually, when I was putting together screenshots for this, I had a form that had a drop-down at the top that was required, and I didn't fill it out when I submitted the form so I could take a picture of the error message. And I was surprised that the error message didn't include that drop-down, and it was because there wasn't an empty value at the top. So if you don't have an empty value and a field is required, and the user doesn't fill out the field, that first option is going to be selected by default. So the browser will never realize that form hasn't been filled out. So if that field is required, having an empty option is a good idea.
Okay. Thank you. What is the best way to deal with form fill spam? Would the invisible CAPTCHA version 3 solve the issue while still maintaining form accessibility?
I don't know. There are a few options like honeypots and yeah, spam is really the evil of today, I think. I mentioned in my did I mention that?
You talked about Turnstile.
Turnstile, yeah. I don't know. I haven't researched it, but maybe that's an option. If it's, I think Google version 3 has really privacy issues. That Google, watches what you're doing on the page.
A honeypot might be a better option than a reCAPTCHA.
Yeah.
Spam is always a moving target, though. We come up with spam prevention things, and then spammers find ways around them. So it kind of requires some constant vigilance and research.
Okay. Do you know how Google Forms are set up for the form fields and how it's read?
I haven't researched it.
Yeah, no idea.
Well, with the knowledge you now have, you can actually try it yourself. Does it have a label, and is the label attached to the input field? And if you don't fill anything out, do you get real good warnings and error messages? So try it yourself at home. Yeah.
And then Rian, can you expand why it's helpful to lay out the steps for a user, and is that to prevent user fatigue?
To lay out what?
to prevent user fatigue, to lay out the steps for the form for a user?
I don't think it's for fatigue. I think it's for anxiety.
Okay.
I think it's to make people sure that they actually know. Yeah, or you think if it's a long form that people like in the middle think from, okay, that's so much, I quit. And that's what you mean with fatigue. I think doing it in steps makes it easier and more people have a better overview. So it's it's usability and better user experience.
If I may, I'm going to add to that, especially for forms that are taking long, and in some cases people have to look up something or step away for a moment, and occasionally the browser will refresh and they lose everything. So this may be a more general question, but do you have any thoughts on caching user input into a form? I've seen that happen sometimes, and I find it much more helpful, like if I've typed a paragraph and then I navigate somewhere, or in some cases if you lose focus and navigate and you come back and it disappears versus in some cases it stays. Is that strictly a browser issue, or is there some way to sort of ensure, okay, I'm not going to lose all my input, especially for longer forms and especially for forms that are broken up in different steps?
I think that's mostly browser behavior. Over the past few years, browsers have gotten a lot better, because I've had that experience where, your browser crashes or your computer crashes and you've spent an hour filling out this thing and you don't want to lose everything. I think that's mostly browser behavior. I think Chrome in particular is really good about just remembering what you've filled in, but I don't know off the top of my head, like you'd have to have some sort of mechanism for storing all of that in browser storage, which could get complicated.
Okay. And if anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to put them in a Slido. I guess we could take another moment here just to see if anything else comes in. And if there's any other follow-up thoughts that either of you would like to add. And hello to the kitty.
Yeah.
Check. Oh. Okay, so yeah, all right, well, it looks like, oh, here we go, we have another one coming in. Your opinion on iframe forms from HubSpot and Pardot and etc.
Well, I'm not going to give an opinion about forms I haven't researched. So I really don't know. I do know if you want an accessible site and you have a third-party application like such a form in an iframe, do your research if that third-party application is accessible too, because it's part of your process. So maybe you say, oh no, it's off topic because it's from somebody else, but if a visitor needs that application to perform a task, then that needs to be accessible too. So do your research before you actually import such a third-party application or iframe.
Okay. Thank you. We do want to give just a quick, we just missed him. We just wanted to give a quick shout out to Edgar. Thank you it's a great session, and his work is delightful and impossible to ignore. So thank you once again. And it looks like we don't really have any more questions coming in, so if it's okay, I will go ahead and wrap up, and I will tell you both thank you so much for an amazingly informal session. I want to just let everybody know they can continue the conversation in the chat or on social media. Please use the hashtag WPA11Y Day, the WPLI Day, and the WPAD 2022 hashtags. We also would appreciate if you go to the WordPress accessibility.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on their presentation, and you can enter to win a t-shirt while you're there. Coming up next, please stay tuned. We have the proof accessible websites can be beautiful too, coming with Gary Ausant and Stephen Plummer. And while you're waiting, don't forget to visit our sponsors' pages to grab virtual swag and enter for a chance to win great prizes. So thank you to both so much again, and hopefully we'll see everybody here right after the break.
Now, thank you so very much. This is a very well organized and absolutely fabulous event. So thank you, and it's an honor to be here.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.